Hello and welcome to CardsCast, the football podcast all about Woking Football Club. Through this podcast, you'll hear roundtable discussions, match previews and reviews, interviews, as well as us sharing our favourite memories of players, matches and seasons from the past. My name is Glen Harrington and I'm joined as ever by Jacob Greenwood to talk all about the latest goings on at the club. But before we get into it, remember to like, share and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts from. So Jacob, I think in our last episode, we talked about Neal Ardley having 2 games to save his job. The 2 games were Brackley and Altrincham. Ultimately, we ended up having 2 games against Brackley, which didn't go our way. He did get the win that he needed against Altrincham, but it was certainly a rocky week or two before I guess a more positive recent period with the draws against Rochdale and Southend. But what have been your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, I'm slightly stunned that we didn't have an emergency podcast somewhere in between with a managerial firing along the way. But yeah, it seems like calmer waters now, doesn't it? Kind of a couple of weeks on. So yeah, so kind of a very different approach to what some other clubs probably have done. But yeah, I mean, the Brackley games. What's interesting about Brackley is I think we play them at home in the not too distant future, and I think that'll be quite a nice moment to be like, well, if we're improving, what are we going to do when we play them at home later this year or whenever it is? Because I'd quite like to see that after they've completely. I mean, the 1-1 game, it was the first half was just dreadful. It's just nothing really happened. The second half looked okay, got the goal, got a replay, fine, and then the way we lost to the replay was really felt like a defining moment in the season. Kind of whatever happened next. So yeah, hopefully we're kind of really up for that game when we play them again and say, well, actually, we've kind of moved on from that. But yeah, I guess since then, obviously the club have made the decision to kind of stick with Neal and back him, which I think pretty much all the fans I speak to or see online pretty much agree with. It's quite a universal thing. So I think that probably makes it quite a popular decision. And it seems like there was some soul searching along the way from the team and the manager and everyone for that week, and the response seems to have been pretty good. But yeah, I think obviously disappointing to miss out on the FA Cup. I think, especially looking at what Brockley have got on and done, got their first round game on TV. They got their second round game on TV. But yeah, I guess sometimes I just kind of, some of our players that just kind of chuck the towel in at that game away. Hopefully, they're kind of watching those things, thinking, "Oh, that'd have been us if we'd have actually kind of not absolutely gone off a cliff in that game." But it's over for this season now. Obviously, we miss out on the prize money, any TV money, whatever, which will probably have quite a big impact, I should think, for the accounting side of things this season, and if we can get more players in or whatever. So that's a shame. But yeah, I think I think it's interesting that obviously the club have chosen to kind of back Neal, because I don't think there's many teams going out like that in the FA Cup, like so emphatically would have done what we've done. So, and obviously we've talked about breaking the cycle and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how it does pan out. But and as you say, the early signs do look relatively good. And sacking the managers doesn't always get you moving in the right direction, as quite a few clubs have probably found out this season. So yeah, interesting, a really kind of interesting time. But yeah, I guess we'll look back and judge it on what happens next. But it did feel to me, as I'm sure it did to you as well, that 6-2. I mean, if we'd have lost that game 2-1 or something, it probably wouldn't have felt as dramatic. But as the goals were flying in, kind of late in the game, it was just like, oh, this feels like this is going to be the end of an era. But obviously, it wasn't.
Yeah, you think you've taken kind of a number of my sort of follow-up questions and points there. The question was going to be, how close do you think we came to pulling the trigger? And obviously we talked at length in the last episode about the disappointing start to the season, the form, the incomings, outgoings, what in hindsight we felt about those, maybe what we felt around Jodie's position as director of football, whether there could have even been a change before that point. you look at, as you alluded to, the number of managerial changes that have happened, certainly the bottom half of our division this season. I haven't got the list to hand, but we must be rapidly approaching double figures if we're not already, and we're probably, with I think the exception of the likes of Truro and Brackley, who are obviously smaller teams on smaller budgets that are coming up from leagues below. Pretty much everybody else has made a change, so it's a noticeable difference that we've not pulled the trigger, and I did believe that the kind of FA Cup game and the subsequent league game against Altrincham could be decisive. It was for Darren Sarll. I think you reminded me last time that it wasn't the FA Cup game, it was the Oxford City game the week after that was the kind of killer blow. And I certainly felt in the aftermath of the Brackley game, I thought firstly that the manner of the defeat might be enough in of itself. And I certainly felt that if we didn't show a real kind of fight back and get a positive result at the next weekend, that would be the final blow. As it was, I think it was the Altrincham manager that went after that result. So somebody did lose their job, but thankfully from Neal Ardley's perspective, it wasn't him. But how close do you think realistically we came?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, isn't it? I think all the bets from my point of view, like that if you're not going to do it after the 6-2, it's just like, when is it? But you're right, actually, there are a lot of comparisons between that Darren Sarll kind of the run of games, or the two games he had there, where it was like, okay, you've gone out the FA Cup. That was worse, obviously, that was a team in leagues below rather than one in our own league. And then the Oxford game. I think also the one thing that I think is really hard to tell, but the club do have to figure it out, is if the players have basically given up on the manager, and that's a part of it. And I'm like, to me, the 6-2 felt like that. It was just like, we've just given up here. But then when he doesn't go after that, just maybe some of the players are like, oh well, he's not going to go, maybe anytime soon, so maybe we pull our fingers out and do it. But I think the big thing is probably actually, like, if there's managers out there that you feel like you could go and get at that moment in time, in that window where you let a manager go. Because obviously, as we saw with the Sarll departure, was we just didn't have anyone for like 6 weeks or something, and
there was no plan, was there? It was so unexpected, and it obviously felt in that moment that there was no other viable decision. But I certainly felt at that time that the personal relationship and that sort of side of the situation felt more untenable than this one does. And you alluded to it quite rightly earlier on, where you said that the majority, if not almost all of the fan base, seemed, while upset and disappointed, understandably, still felt like they were on side and were desperate to see him do well.
Yeah, that plays a big part, I think, doesn't it? Because if you've got all the fans kind of, really going crazy and kind of toxic, then that does play a big part of it. So I think it does all kind of the situation and sort of who's out there. We're always kind of told that clubs are always kind of succession planning, I think they call it. So they've always got their eye out there for managers. But the reality of it is you look at people like Hinshelwood, another manager who failed to beat us and got sacked, although for very different reasons. He lost his job and he was out in the market for like a few weeks, and then he's gone somewhere. So it is a real moment in time. Like, if you're going to let someone go, it does feel like you probably want to have a couple of options that are out of work that you can approach. Otherwise, it is very much like, oh, we've got rid of them. And then it's like, well, who's coming in? You can end up in that situation we did, where it's like, we've got a caretaker, and now there's nobody, and now we're having to go out and hunt for people. And that's obviously what happened with Michael Doyle, because it was like he wasn't really kind of an obvious choice and out there. They kind of had to go and find candidates like that. So it's I think if there's no one out there, then that probably makes it difficult. But I think maybe if there had been people out there, that might have been an option. But it just, as you said, it probably is double figures by this time in the season, and it's just the turnover is just wild. And I don't really know why it happens. It just feels like the done thing now, where every team basically gets rid of their manager, or like 75% of the league do throughout the season. And that's just kind of what they do in this league now. And I'm sure some teams will succeed by doing that, but others won't. And then I think if you don't succeed from it, you can kind of go through like multiple managers in a season. I mean, God knows how much that's going to cost you in kind of payouts and stuff. And then you kind of look at it and go, well, have we ended up with a better manager than we had in the first place after like cycling through all the different ones? And I guess when you look at Ardley's experience and what he's done before, and obviously the club will have a better view of what he's doing now, then yeah, that all kind of goes into it. And as I said earlier as well, I think if they get the team together, which I guess the director of football might, if they're speaking to the captain or some senior players, and if they're saying like, no, we all like working with Neal, like we still believe in him. Obviously, it sounds like they had kind of a meeting where they kind of, got everything out of their systems and kind of had a bit of a reset, and that maybe looked like it works as well. That can only really be effective if people still believe in the management team. So hopefully that means that they do. But if they didn't, for example, I think then you've got no choice, because, I mean, we've seen it before. I think if you look at when Doyle left, we were really pants. And then literally Neal came in on the Thursday, Friday, didn't take a training session, I don't think. Basically just turned up at the Altrincham game and we won it. And it was the week before we had lost like 4-0 to Gateshead, looked terrible. And the next weekend we're beating a decent side at home, and just everything was different. The players gave more. It was just, the whole thing changed. And I think that's when you can tell that the players have given up on the manager, is then they give that performance. And I'm not sure this team is quite there at the moment. I'm not sure that would really happen, and maybe that's because they still believe in the management team, and if they do, then that's probably a big part of the decision.
To be cynical for a moment, do you think that the financial side of it had anything to do with it? You referenced we'd be looking at sacking a third manager in 2 years, pretty much to the day. I don't know whether we are still paying out for any of those previous departures, and also to your point around who's available, if we were to be seeking someone that's in employment already and you were having to buy them out of a contract, could the club afford to do that in a season where, as you say, we've not progressed to the first round of the FA Cup? We're probably not making a huge amount of money. We're probably making more of a loss than we anticipated, to put it in correct terms. Do you think that would have played a part in it, or do you think that wouldn't have reached that stage of their thinking?
I think it must just be one of the factors, but it is straight. That's why I think it's so strange that so many teams are so trigger happy at this level, because it's like it must cost them a fortune. Because managers, I mean, they all seem to be on like 2-3 year deals.
Hartlepool sacked in the last couple of years.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's it's just like a conveyor belt of different managers, and if they're all getting payoffs, it's because again, like, they don't sign 6 months contracts or 1 season contracts. They all seem to be on multi-year deals, which then get paid out. So it is a crazy way to do things, and it is a waste of money. But I don't know. I think it's tricky to say, really. I think if they really feel like a change needs to be made, then it would do, because obviously relegation is such a big such a big thing, especially with the Conference South. And you just have to look at some of the teams that used to be quite comfortable in this league, and now they're really struggling in the league below. I think, teams will do whatever it takes to, but there's still so much time to go that, if it, you wouldn't have to do it now. I think the problem with doing it now is you could foreseeably get a new manager in and then have to sack them like in February. Like, it's still not very good, and you're still worried about going down. So I'm sure that all comes into it. What I would hope is teams kind of have clauses probably in there about stuff that kind of make it kind of easier to part ways if the performances aren't good enough. I don't know if they would really accept those clauses. And actually, to be fair, it's a good point actually that you were making about the finances and that kind of stuff. Is actually, to be fair, that's another good reason why it's so hard to get someone in. It's not who's out there and if we want them, but it's who wants to come to us. And if they're seeing, a high turnover of managers, and now we've got even less money because we've just sacked a manager and had to maybe get someone out of another job, and we've got even less money, not gone through in the cup. So it's just like, oh, do you want to come and join and be in a relegation fight with us? And they might just be like, no, because again, even if you're taking a manager from the level below, for example, which a few teams have done in our league, and they're doing well in the league below or a couple of leagues below, they might just be like, no, I'd rather be part of a team that's kind of winning quite a bit and we're going somewhere than just trying to survive with one in the league above. So I'm sure there's many different factors, and that's what doesn't make it an easy decision. But I think it's quite funny because I think Neal was speaking about kind of they had like a team meeting. Obviously the players had the meeting, but I think he had a meeting. Jody and kind of all of that lot the day after the game, and he must have walked into that thinking, "This is me getting fired," and then it must be quite a big boost to be backed, I think, in that position, because it literally couldn't have gone worse. Like everything seems to have gone wrong, and you've got that meeting the next day, and you kind of go into it thinking, yeah, this is probably me done for. And they're like, no, actually, we stick with you. We still believe in you. They probably said, we'll probably back you with some players, or hopefully they said something like that as well. I think again that could give the management team, I think, a real boost to think, wow, like that's real commitment, especially based on what goes on elsewhere. So you never know, that might have had kind of a positive impact as well. So I wish we all had bosses that were that lenient. It was not like football, so it doesn't really work like that. But yeah, there's so many different factors. It's hard to nail it down. But yeah, I'm sure it's been in discussions. But there's so many things you have to look at, aren't there? I guess before you make any kind of rash decisions. But football owners, this isn't a message about Tottenham or our owners. But you look at some of the owners in the Premier League and stuff like that, and they're just absolutely crazy. And they're just like they're just not. They don't really think with logic, and it's all kind of emotion and that kind of stuff. Whereas it seems what we've done is kind of more based, it's kind of more reasonable, and isn't just so rushed. Because it feels like some. I mean, I'm not comparing us to Nottingham Forest, but that Marinakis signing where he was sacked like 10 minutes after the game or something for Forest, it was just Postecoglou was sacked so soon after the game, and it's just so
and after this isn't a Premier League podcast, so I don't want to make this a big discussion point, but yeah, the fact that you hire a manager with such a opposing style to your previous outgoing one, and then you give him 6 games to implement his style with players that he didn't choose, that are struggling and out of form, already 6 weeks or whatever into the season, and go, right, turn it around immediately with no additional help, support or investment. That's the expectation. And I think it's a valid and interesting point to make, because it is a style that we're seeing filter down to our level. And it was one of the things I wanted to ask about, really, is what do you think is causing again, I don't have the statistics in front of me to say one way or the other as to whether this level of turnover is unusual, but it feels exceptionally high to me for first week in November. Do you think it's a case of just there's a log jam of teams trying to get out of this division, clubs that are accustomed to being at a higher level, that feel they deserve to be there? And I think we talked about it in our season preview podcast a few months ago, that there's probably 15, 16 teams that think their expectation at the start of the season is we're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the big thing, isn't it? Is I think probably half the league are thinking we really need to get out of this league and get promoted, and they just can't comprehend that there's other good teams and that might not happen, and you might have owners that are only there for a few years. I mean, we've seen that with our previous owners, where it's like they basically have a pot of money which is going to last about 3 seasons, and it's like, well, if you want to do it in that short space of time, you don't really have time to just, we've wasted another season, and it's their money as well. So I do get that thing. So yeah, there's a lot that obviously want to kind of get out of the league, and I think the other half is teams that are so frightened about dropping out of it, because we've seen what happens to teams. You know, and some of them, you know, they're not massive clubs, but they, you know, they go down to the Conference South, they struggle there, they go down again. I mean, teams like Dover and Dartford, I think, kind of got double relegations and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen teams like Dagenham who are still struggling down the bottom of the Conference South. I think a lot of people are really scared about their teams kind of losing relevance, because the National League is a lot stronger, and I think it's done really well in recent years, boosted by some of the big teams being down here. That again, teams, you know, really want to be in this league, and if it's starting to look like they're going to drop out of it, they make that change, which is good. But I think the point about there being so many means that the ratio of success just isn't very much. It's not very high. So I think, you know, some teams will sack their manager and then get a bit of a boost and then go on a run and do whatever, and that's fine. But just others don't. I think that's kind of the
Probably worth saying as well that I don't think anyone that's changed is in a markedly different position to what they were prior to the change. Obviously, I think York have had some relative success under Maynard, but they were near the top when they sacked Hinchelwood anyway, so not a great deal has changed.
It's true, and it's all the same managers as well, isn't it? Because there's only a certain number of managers that will manage at this level. So it just feels like the same people going around the club. Well, again, you do get that in the top leagues as well. So yeah, it is very weird. And actually, because football isn't like any other industry, managers probably don't really mind it. I think as long as they can stay in the game, then it kind of works for them. Because, you know, someone like Hinchelwood, it's like, oh great, thanks, you've given me a payoff. A month later, you're in another job. You know, it's probably
he's just come back to where he was before, hasn't he? Where he's happy and comfortable. So yeah.
You normally find some managers as well, like even sort of the Aldershot stuff that's gone on there. But again, that's a good example. I know that they didn't sack their manager, but I don't think they were massively happy with him. So I think it kind of suited all parties when he moved on. But they've got a new manager in, and they had Douse as temporary manager, and he didn't win any games. And they've got a new bloke in, and he's not won any games yet, including an FA Cup defeat against a team in the league below. And it's just like this kind of thing that you'd see a manager and then go on like a run of form and get a bit of a reaction. Just, I don't know. It's maybe because there's so many seconds, it can't happen to every team, but it just doesn't really seem to work. And Yeovil was a good one, because obviously we played them just as they were kind of doing their stuff of getting rid of one, and then they got one, and then he left after a game, and it's just chaos. And then they're not any better than they were.
No.
They didn't.
No, they've gone through all that effort and upheaval, and they're in pretty much the same league position as they were before. But yeah, and you know, let's maybe give some credit to the owners and the people in charge of our club, that they're looking at those sort of things and going, why bother? Why just be another team? Are we really going to be any better off if we go and get another seasoned National League manager who's going to come in and try and do much the same thing that Neal's already trying to do?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like he's kind of like crashing out of the job either, and like has lost the plot and is just like almost self-sabotaging the everything and just going out in a blaze of glory, because he's just not that kind of guy. From what I can see from the outside, Neal's not that kind of guy. So it probably makes that thing a whole lot easier, doesn't it? Because then you can be level-headed and reasonable about it. But yeah, I mean, if any of us were probably owners of the club, you'd just act on emotion, as we were saying earlier, and you've lost 6-2, and you probably would have just been stood there in the stands and been like, well, that's him sacked, I'm not putting up with that.
It takes a lot to not be sucked up in that emotion, because football is a very emotional thing, right? And it's very easy to make these decisions in the spur of the moment. So yeah, credit where credit's due, that more sensible heads prevailed, and we have to trust, I guess, as fans, that those decisions were made for the right reasons, and not some of the reasons we talked about earlier of, oh, we just can't afford it, or we don't really know who else to get, or we haven't got anyone in mind, so we don't want 6 weeks without a manager, because that's happened before and it didn't go very well.
Yeah, it's all true. It's hard. It's a collection of things, but yeah, no credit. I mean, credit to the club. But we'll see what happens next, as we say. If we now go and lose 10 in a row or something, then we might say, well, that was the wrong decision. But you know, I think you have to admire it to a sense that that when all that pressure builds and they're kind of like, no, we're just doing this thing, we're kind of bucking the trend a bit. Fair play. I think it's a pretty good thing to do. But as you said earlier, I think the fact that the manager still has a lot of backing from the fans, I think, plays a big part in it. And I don't really know why that happens. By the way, there's no like rhyme or reason. Obviously, there's loads of factors you could bring into it. But as I was saying, Ardley hasn't kind of crashed out, so he hasn't been doing interviews where he's been blaming the fans or moaning about stuff or like none of that kind of stuff, which I think probably helps quite a lot.
He's very good at putting his hands up, isn't he? And he strikes the right balance in his interviews with, honesty. He takes the blame when he feels he's to blame. He will sort of gently call out players without throwing them under the bus, like we have seen certain other managers do in the past. And equally, I don't think he gets too carried away when things are going positive. He does seem very level-headed, which I think people will respect. He's clearly got a long history and a strong CV to fall back on, which Doyle didn't. And I think probably most sort of level-headed fans, when you take the emotion of the night of a game out of it, can stand back and go, well, he's had lots of success. We're kind of lucky to have him in a way. Is there really anyone that we're realistically going to get that's going to come in and do a better job and have us in a better position in 6-12 months' time?
Yeah, probably not. I think that's a lot of what goes into it. So yeah, we'll see. In these podcasts at the moment, it's always kind of feels like, well, we'll see what we have to say in the next one. But fingers crossed.
Yeah, it'd be nice not to be having this same roundabout discussion in a month's time, and hopefully that moves us on quite nicely, because I think we put the Brackley game to one side, and even within that game there are extenuating circumstances that you can point to. We went in 2-2 at half time and down to 10 men with a somewhat controversial red card. They get a couple of goals late that make a bad result look even worse. But 6-2, was it a 6-2 game? Really, that suggests an absolute mauling. It maybe wasn't that. And actually, that's now our one defeat in 8 games in all competitions, which is a bit strange to think about when you consider kind of the mood around the club, the mood in the fan base, and what it's sort of been like for the majority of this season. As I say, 1 defeat in 8, 5 unbeaten in the league. We've just taken 2 points off of 2 of the better teams in the division. Should have won last night and got another sort of positive result. And if we had held on for the last sort of couple of minutes against Southend, then we'd be talking about us kind of up into the sort of mid-table positions and sort of even distance between playoffs and relegation. As it is, that we're still kind of a couple of points further back. But to me, it feels like there's an opportunity to sort of push ourselves further away from that kind of bottom 4 in the run up to Christmas. Looking at the games that we've got coming up, we've obviously had a bit of a tough run with Forest Green, Rochdale, Southend in quite close proximity, but I think I saw someone on CardsBoard say we've played 9 of the top 10 now, something like that. So hopefully, theoretically, it's never quite that simple with us, is it? But theoretically, there's some more winnable games to come, and I would like to think that we're heading into the new year kind of in that sort of 10th to 14th sort of range, and we're not talking about we're 1 point above the bottom 4, or we're 1 point into the bottom 4, whatever it might be, which is where we found ourselves the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you have those positive, the run stuff is a little bit tricky, I think, because there's been some results in there. I think some of the stuff I've seen online, which is like, well, if you exclude the cup result, we're on this kind of run. It's like, yeah, you can't exclude the cup result, unfortunately, because it was so crazy and it was like so bad, as we've just covered for the first half of the podcast. But so that's always a little bit like that. And obviously there's games like Truro and stuff in there. It's like, it just wasn't a good result. Like it
No.
just wasn't, and it's fine that this kind of thing gets built up, but it really is always what happens next. Because I think when we were talking before the show, like we sort of had a bit of a run like this earlier in the season, and everyone was like, "Oh, I think this is it. I think the corner's been turned," and all of a sudden it just like spirals back to and crashes down again. So it's always what happens next. But as you say, it's so tight in the league that if you do go on a run of well, we need to start winning games rather than draws. But obviously, as you said, we're playing teams that aren't right at the top. That we have a better chance to do that. But if you can start getting those wins, then it's so tight in there that you do kind of motor through the table a bit, and then people are looking upwards rather than downwards. And there probably is reason to be positive going into the second half of the season. But yeah, if we don't, as you say, it is going to be another relegation fight, third one in 3 years. Like, I mean, just speaking from a personal point of view, I just don't have the enthusiasm for that again. It's just getting quite boring to doing that. Yeah, obviously it is exciting when it gets to like the end, you got to win games, and you do, but it's just like, yeah, I think especially with the expectations at the start of the season. But yeah, I mean, positive signs certainly, kind of the way that we played, especially last night, I think as well, because as you say, we should have won it. Obviously, the late goal is frustrating, but also, we hit the post just before that. We hit the bar after their goal went in. Like, it's not like we were kind of cowering and not attacking. So I think it's good to see us on the front foot and doing something. And if we do that against teams that are technically not as good, then yeah, hopefully it'll be good. And I think if we had, okay, we've got a tricky game on Saturday as well, really. But I think once we get kind of our home games again, if we can kind of beat someone, relatively comfortably, and I'm not saying another 5-0 like we did against Gateshead, but if you beat, I think Boston's coming up, but if you beat them 2-0 at home without much drama, I think then it would feel like, oh wow, like this, something has changed here. Because as we say, when we went into games like the Truro ones, it's like this is a must-win game. I think Truro had scored like 1 goal away all season. They'd got 0 points. And then they came and came close to beating us at home, and you're like, I mean, that's just, it's just not very good. So but any win is good, but if we can make ourselves look kind of comfortable and look like we've got a style and look like we've got a shape and we kind of got an 11 that we kind of are rolling with, which is difficult because of the injuries and stuff. I think that would be give a lot of confidence to the players, but also the fans, because it's as you say, it could go either way at the moment.
Yeah, and we kind of in that position where we sort of say every block of games or every month is even more crucial than the last one, but it does feel that again it could go one or two ways. You look at the fixture list for November in front of me, so Tamworth away, Boston at home, Aldershot away, Brackley at home. That's 3 bottom half teams. Yes, one of them's a derby, but certainly the 2 home games, if we've got any realistic ambitions of pushing on, we need to be winning both those games. We would want to get a measure of revenge against Brackley, who I'd imagine would have one eye on their upcoming FA Cup second round game at that point as well. Tamworth away is a hard game. We know, that they're very strong at home and they've got the pitch and the advantages that brings with it, but it's not an insurmountable challenge, and we've shown in the games against Rochdale and Southend that we're capable of matching it with the best in this league. So Tamworth aren't one of those. Let's be realistic and say that we need to take something from that game as well. And I think if we were to come away with 7-8 points from those 4 games, you extend that kind of mini run to something more tangible and recognizable that other people start to take notice of, then you're in a much better position. But if we're back here next month talking about the fact that we've scraped kind of less than 5 points from those games and we're dropping back down towards the bottom 4, then you're probably still in kind of much the same position and sort of level of uncertainty that we are at the moment. And I imagine the goodwill and the sort of faith that has been restored will start to waver again.
Yeah, definitely. It's no surprise, is it, really, to say that, but it does really feel like that. And the derby game is obviously an interesting one because it's like, it's kind of amplified either way if you win it or lose it. It's like 10 times worse if you lose it, 10 times better if you win it, whatever. So that kind of feels like a bit of a one as well. But yeah, I think that's the shame as well, though, because obviously, as you say, like Hamworth's not an easy place to go, but it is. I think that's the biggest shame of the season for me is that we're having conversations like this where it's like boring words. Oh well, they're really good. We can't expect anything. It's just like, come on, like it's just so frustrating after where we were at the start of the season, sort of before the season started. And I know I predicted to finish kind of more mid-table, but the vibe was so good and everyone was so positive. And then you kind of a few months in, and it's like, well, yeah, you couldn't possibly go to Tamworth and do. It's just like, oh god, like it's just crazy. But yeah, as you say, definitely some winnable games in there, and momentum can go either way. So if we can get some good results and go on a positive run, then that'd be really useful. And as I say, if one of those was against Aldershot, that almost feels like that would be quite a big moment because obviously there's so much focus on that game. But obviously it is only another 3 points and all that kind of stuff. So you don't get some points for it, but it probably the mood of things probably would change if we won it or lost it.
Yeah, my slight fear with that one is I was just looking at Aldershot's recent record, and they've lost 8 of the last 10 in all competitions, and they've had 3 different managers in that run. It's a bit of a shame, by the way, that we're not going to see Douse back in a dugout at Woking, but wasn't to be. But yeah, as I say, 8 defeats out of the last 10, and their next 2 games are Forest Green and Rochdale. So it would be just our luck if they come into a home game against the local rivals with that horrible barren run, and that screams home win, doesn't it? But yeah, that's the eternal Woking pessimist in me.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, yeah, we've seen enough of those games to unfortunately have that feeling before all of them. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Obviously, another team that's down there, I doubt they'll be very confident. Well, unless they go and pick up something in their games before then. But yeah, I'm sure their new manager will go on a run at some stage, and things will start to click. But but until then, hopefully we can go there and because if they don't win those ones, I mean, he'll have had a real kind of horror start to his spell there.
Well,
so
yeah, I mean,
the pressure will be on.
If he loses the next 3, including the one against us, I think that'll be 6 out of 6, and pressure starts to mount, doesn't it, after that sort of run?
Yeah, no, definitely. So so that would be a nice twist on it. So a bit different not having it at Christmas this year. So I don't know, maybe we can move on quicker if we don't get the result we want. But yeah, that feels like an important one. I think it always kind of does. It always feels like a bit of a turning point in derby games, no matter who's playing in them. If you lose it or if you win it, it kind of does feel that it can kind of go either way. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I think also there's stuff like injuries and all of these kind of things. If we can get players back and be playing the way we want. All of those games you mentioned, I think there's no reason we should be going into all of those games, expecting points. Watching us this season, I got no idea what happened. But you can always be positive that I think especially after watching the last few games, that we've kind of sorted it out defensively. Maybe not so much going forward, but
I get the sense it's coming. That's me with my optimistic hat on, and I know that you don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly, but I agree. I do think it's better defensively. I think we're seeing defensive players, Okoli particularly, coming back into form. I think Jaskalainen being back has helped. I think we feel like we've got a settled midfield now, which feels significant considering the issues that we were having there at the start of the season. I think having Forster Kaski and Timi Akinola looking fully fit has made a big difference. And yes, we're not quite seeing the level of goals from the centre forwards that we maybe hoped for, but Josh Kelly is starting to score. Boatswain has looked a reasonable addition. Obviously, we've managed to ship Effiong out, and we've got Asude back from suspension, I think, this weekend. So, and he, grabbed a token hat trick in the Surrey Senior Cup as well. So, which I didn't include in the 1 win in 8 or the 1 defeat in 8. By the way, I didn't include that game. I did include the National League Cup game, but that's only because it was listed on BBC Sport when I looked at it. But yeah, I think there's more to feel optimistic about than pessimistic about from the squad perspective. I do think that we're 2, maybe 3 short. I think we desperately need another defender just to give us some more options, because we're still, we've got 6 players for 5 positions. Odyssey has been injured. So really the back 5 kind of picks itself. So another option, probably a left-sided option, would be good, because we only really have Caleb Richards. Hines has done a good job at left wing back. That's not his natural position. Caleb Richards arguably not in his natural position as a left centre back. And I think we're probably 1 short in midfield with Gorman still out, and Beautyman having issues with form and fitness, and perhaps isn't best suited to a midfield 3. Is better used as a number 10. So it would be nice to see another option in there. And then the other thought I had after last night was whether, if Sanderson was going to be sidelined for a while, which thankfully it doesn't sound like he is, then that would have us probably looking at entering back in for another striker again. So it's arguably throughout the whole sort of spine of the team we're maybe 1 short, but it doesn't feel like we're a million miles away, which maybe it did a sort of a month into the season, where we kind of going, oh well, we were feeling quite positive about this, but actually none of it is working. So maybe we need 6, 7, 8 new players.
Yeah, certainly. I think even some of those, like Timmy Akinola's, felt like a new player, because he just wasn't getting any game time. And when he did get kind of glimpses, he looked good, but he still wasn't really playing. And now he's getting a lot more game time. So stuff like that, and Forster Kasky kind of getting up to speed and stuff like that. I think they've almost felt like new signings kind of along the way. I know Forster Kasky was a bit later joining as well. So that's also something worth bearing in mind. But yeah, it does feel like that, but it doesn't feel like anything's really imminent. It doesn't. I don't know. I think we've been quite considered, kind of the way that we've done stuff in recent times. We've sort of not rushed players in and got the wrong ones. Obviously, we did a lot of that early last season, and you summed it up with just like loads of players, but none of them, like strikers as well, but none of them scored any goals. And it's just like, what's the point? There's no point in doing that. So you've kind of got to be careful, I guess. But now Winnie's moved out. I know he's only gone for a month initially, but if he could go permanently, that's going to free up some wages or some money maybe to do something.
Yeah, I would still argue that Ardley / Jody's hit rate on signings is pretty good. I don't think we've had too many bad signings in the last sort of 12 months after the kind of horror show that was the previous summer. And we've talked many times about the caveats that need to get applied to that. But it feels like the players that maybe aren't kind of at the top of their game at the moment, we've seen enough from to suggest that they will still prove their value in time, and that those that aren't kind of getting in the team or getting in the squad at the moment are getting the opportunity to play elsewhere, which is a good thing.
To be fair, I think a lot of the ones that were misses in terms of hits or misses for the signings they did were because they panicked at certain points. And that's the thing, is if you panic now and just go and get some random person and it doesn't work out, it's just no point in doing it. So as a fan, you'd always want to be like just getting new players, like whatever.
It's the Douse model, isn't it? Is a new signing every Friday. Multiple players every single week, and then you have like 50 throughout the season. But yeah, it's just, that doesn't always work, obviously, and we'll have to wait and see. And obviously they were kind of patient to get Kelly, and that's kind of paid off, and he looks to kind of be improving. So yeah, you kind of I get why they wait and don't rush into things, but as a fan, you're always like, let's just go and sign this amazing player, but it's not really realistic. But who you say now, when he's moved on, or might move on, hopefully more permanently, because there's no point in hanging around here if he's not going to play. It's a waste of time for everyone involved and money. And look, he's what, fifth, maybe sixth choice realistically if everyone's fit. So yeah, I don't see him having a long-term future with us.
No, exactly. So yeah, there's no point in that. And then there's no point getting like a loan in from somewhere from that just doesn't get many goals. Blight Swain has been good. I think potentially on the last podcast, that's when he just joined. I was quite critical of the fact he hadn't really done anything anywhere before. But obviously, he's still.
I don't think he played a game for us before.
No, I think we just
when we
signed
last
him.
spoke. I think he then went on to score on his debut, and I think again in the following league or his league debut as well. So he very quickly proved us wrong. Which we I think if you go back and listen to it, we said that obviously we hoped he did. We didn't know a huge amount about him. You know, as always at this level, you can only really go by kind of Wikipedia CVs, can't you? And his didn't read that well, but players have got to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he looks okay. He looks, again, I think it was the Brackley goal in the FA Cup was a bit weird because he was just sort of unmarked in the 6-yard box when a corner came in. Like, when I say unmarked, there was like no one near him.
Yes,
And it almost looked like the ref would have blown and been like, oh no. I hadn't blown
pushed someone over or something. Yeah,
like something had gone wrong. It was that weird. And but the one at Altrincham I thought was a good goal. I think the Altrincham commentators were like, oh, it's a tap in, and I really don't think it was. I think he did really well to be in the position he was in and kind of anticipate the ball coming at the angle it did, and just kind of placing it in the right part of the goal, which was really good. So it was a decent goal. So but he's not here. I guess that's only a relatively short-term thing as well. So we will see. And as you say, it's good that Sanderson doesn't seem to be, concussion or any kind of break or anything like that, because that didn't look great last night. Because he's good as well. So we'll see what happens. But I think there's certainly room. Once we figure out what formation we definitely want to play, you could probably then go out and do something. It still feels.
I think it's this one, isn't it? It doesn't show any signs of moving away from it. He's had the opportunity to kind of probably use all of his players in it one way, shape, or form, and it doesn't feel like a short-term fix to break us out of a bad run of form anymore, because he's stuck through it through a positive period, another negative period, and then back into a positive period again. So it feels like this is probably here to stay.
I guess O'Brien kind of comes back in as well, doesn't he? Which is like another. I know he's not scored that many this season, but he can take chances and do that kind of thing. So I guess when you start to look at that kind of thing, that certainly helps as well. Hopefully, I don't think he'll be that far away now.
No, a couple of weeks maybe.
Yeah, so that'd be decent. So always worth bearing those things in mind. And then as you say, Josh comes back from suspension again. That feels like it's been a very long time since he got that red card. So it'd be good to see him back as well, and that kind of freshens things up a bit. And we'll go from there. But we'll see what happens. It would be good to see some more players, but they have to be the right ones. That'll be the final word on that from me.
Yeah, absolutely. And but just a couple more points before we wrap up. The first one, and we've kind of alluded to it with a number of the things we've talked about tonight, but expectations for the rest of the season. I know you said much the same to me over Messenger as what you said earlier in the podcast around, it's hard to get yourself up for another relegation battle, third year in a row. We're out the FA Cup. What would you consider success given where we're at come November, and what would make you feel more optimistic about next season?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think the kind of negative aspect of it is obviously you got basically no cup run whatsoever. Obviously, the trophy will come about sort of later in the year. So that might be something, as we found that last season, could be quite good if you can go far in that. But if the league's kind of not looking great, you're already out the cup with nothing happening. Maybe the Surrey Senior Cup this year, who knows? But it is tough. It is tough.
I put National League Cup before Surrey Senior Cup, surely.
Who knows? It's difficult.
Got a rich history in that competition.
Yeah, well, yeah, and some teams,
previous versions of it.
The Surrey Senior Cup, a lot of teams are taking that more seriously these days as well. So I think Dorking really wanted to win it last season or the season before, because I think they host the final now. Anyway, they didn't win it, so that's fine. I think it'd just be good to see some progression. Really, I think although I think we've been better in recent weeks, I don't think it's been like electrifying football that's been that interesting. It's been very kind of attritional stuff. And it's had to have been because of the teams we're playing. I get that, and it's fine. But I do just think if we can go to games, as I mentioned slightly earlier, if you can go to some of these games coming up, and it's just you go, we play some really good stuff on our own terms. We go out there, put on a good performance, we win 2-0. It's all great fun, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, on to the next one. I think that can be quite a nice thing to happen. Whereas this season, every win feels just like it's been a bit of a struggle. Obviously, the home form's been pretty dreadful. And obviously, a lot of the fans don't go to away games and stuff. So, people that have paid for season tickets or are turning up every week paying 20-something quid are not seeing very many wins. Certainly not in the league. So, I think that would kind of be the thing. What will success look like? As always, staying in the league is the minimum. I don't think we'll do, mid-table would be great. But I think, again, it's probably more about the trajectory. Because if we're looking to hang on to this management team as well, and maybe some of these players, and I guess you want to look for improvements so that hopefully they can build on it a bit better than we did this summer, I guess. But I think that's always the point, is that if we look like we're moving forwards as a kind of management team and a set of players and all that kind of stuff, and you can see something building, then that's always, I think, always positive to see, because then you can look towards the future, even if that's going to be next season. Let's just look at next season. But there's a lot of games to go until then. So I think, but just as I say, just going to those games and seeing the performances, seeing this in the style that suits us, the players look comfortable, and you're getting the most out of some of the players we've got, because they're not bad players. When you got those players, when Hines has a really good game or something, and you're just like, oh well, yeah, like amazing. It's great that he still plays for us. You kind of forgot how good a thing that was that he stayed, and stuff like that. So I think seeing those kind of performances can make everyone, and as we've seen in this league as well, if you do go on a run, who knows what can happen. We've seen some teams definitely do that in the past, where they've looked completely out of it, and all of a sudden they win a load of games in a row, and all of a sudden they're right up the other end. And obviously they didn't trouble the playoffs or anything, but like last season, what Boston did from like February onwards or whenever it was just absolutely crazy. And when you see teams do that, you're just like, that'd be cool. Even if we don't end up actually going anywhere with it this season, I think that's be fun to be a part of. So hopefully we can start to build those runs a bit, and then I think everything will hopefully start to look a little bit better.
I think obviously much the same for me. I think it would be nice to see some stability after the last couple of years, and again, credit to the ownership for doing their best to put us in a position to have that. I think that certainly I and probably others were guilty of getting carried away with the end of last season, the strong finish, and feeling that the fact that we've been able to retain the majority of those players that we wanted to retain and add to it, that we were going to kick on, and that would kind of automatically mean we'd be looking at playoffs. But realistically, if you look at the Wildston defeat towards the end of last season, where we thought actually we're going to go down, and then 2-3 weeks later we get a couple of good results, and okay, great, we've stayed up fairly comfortably, let's keep all of this squad and push on. Well, actually, if those last couple of weeks had played out differently, that squad could have taken us down. So we're perhaps a little bit guilty of getting carried away. I think you were more realistic with your pre-season kind of predictions of mid-table, and I think kind of realigning my sort of hopes and aspirations for the rest of the season would kind of align myself there as well. 11 out of the 24 teams are either in a promotional playoff position or they're in a relegation position, so there's very little middle ground in this division, and often it is quite compressed, as well, as we saw last season. The teams that are going down over the last couple of years have been going down with 50 odd points, and the teams that have been making the playoffs have only needed kind of 70, 75 rather than 80 plus. So it will be there is no such thing, I think, as a kind of boring season in this division. It just doesn't really happen. So while I don't think realistically, unless something quite incredible happens, and given the strength at the top end of the division, I don't think we're going to be looking at playoffs. But I think it would be nice to at least be looking up rather than down. And I think I've seen enough signs and enough improvements over the last few weeks to suggest that that's realistic. And if we can continue to add to the squad we've got, if we can maybe sign some players on 18-month deals kind of in the second half of the season as we start to look towards next year, the management team remains settled, then, you know, I'll get bored of saying next year will be our year, but, you know, you just want to see forward positive momentum, don't you, rather than thinking, you know, it's just will be kind of like the new Maidenhead and we'll cling on to sort of our place in the division for as many years as we can until inevitably we don't quite make it one year and then we get stuck in the league below, which is what seems to have happened to them. But yeah, I feel more positive, certainly more positive than I did if we'd had that emergency podcast 2 or 3 weeks ago, as we thought we might have done when we woke up on that Wednesday morning of whatever it was.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because if we'd have changed manager after the Brackley game and then had a new manager come in and we were kind of talking about, oh, well, they've come in and we beat Altrincham and then we got these draws against these better teams, and we probably would have been spun as like, oh, this is us on our way to like greatness. So it's just the context of it sometimes, which is quite funny. But you're right. I think last season, teams like Sutton and Eastleigh maybe were just like so mid-table, and it just looked so boring because they were like, there was like no mid-table. There was about 3 teams that made up the mid-table, and everyone else was either in the relegation fight or promotion chase. And it just looked really boring from them from like quite early on. It was just like just going to do that, but I'd rather that, and we were kind of positively building and going forwards, because then you can start planning for next season even earlier as well. Because you can kind of be like, well, we're going to be in the league next season, so we can start to make plans for whatever we're going to do, like we did this season, I guess, when we signed players like Sude for the next season kind of already, and he came in for the end of last season. So, that can be a good thing as well. But obviously, there's a lot of jeopardy involved when you don't know what league you're going to be in. So, I think again, it's just also like at the very, very basic level, football is an entertainment business. Make it entertaining, and obviously you're going to be more entertained if your team are winning, but it's obvious probably. But if they can see some good play, and that's why I think people like watching players like Tim Yakinola, because they're just positive on the front foot. They're making things happen. That's what they want to see. Or
a Sude as well.
We've started to see stuff like that as well. I think in the recent games, that's what I think kind of felt like the crowd in the second half last night kind of really brought into the fact that we were actually kind of having a go and attacking stuff, and that's kind of more what we want to see in the games from now onwards. That'll be good. And then we'll have to wait and see.
Just finally, a very long form update from Todd Johnson was published on the website a few days ago. Probably nothing kind of groundbreaking in there, but always good to see a kind of long form update from the owner. It was obviously the shorter sort of vote of confidence that was put out for Ardley in the aftermath of the Brackley game, or a few days after the Brackley game as well. So we've heard from him a little bit more, I guess, than what we traditionally have since he's been involved in the club. Just wondered if you had any kind of thoughts on what he had to say.
I don't think really any of it came as too much of a surprise. I think it was good to have an update, especially after, as you say, there was that kind of brief one when I kind of saw like the club statement or whatever the day after the Brackley game. It was like, oh, this is it, the manager's gone, and then he wasn't. So that was a bit strange. But again, I think it's always good to communicate, and I think some of the stuff in there was obviously kind of alluding to the fact that things hadn't really been good enough, but these are some of the things we're doing, and obviously some of the off-field stuff as well. So I think always good to hear from them, but I don't think there's anything really in there that was a massive shock. I think you probably get that more with obviously club run written interviews where everything is probably managed to within an inch of its life. So
well, you say that, but I've seen some of what we put out before. we both work in or close enough to that kind of world to know what is and isn't done.
No, very, very good point. But as people that like kind of the kind of media side of things. Everyone's always looking for that kind of controversial soundbite or thing or whatever, and there isn't that really, and that's probably a good thing that it's kind of all feels a bit settled, and obviously also looking at the long term stuff as well, I think is always good, because people can kind of buy into that future then. So always I think always good to have the updates, and hear from people, and but there was no massive shocks, which I think kind of knowing what we know and seeing what we've seen so far, that's probably not a massive surprise. Doesn't really seem like Todd rolls like the guy that's going to drop a bombshell kind of randomly, but you never know.
Send some messages off the record.
Yeah, so if he ever wants to come on the podcast and drop those bombshells, it'd be great for our views. So feel free to come on and do them.
That's not our most listened to episode. Thanks, Drew. Cool. Well, as always, thank you everyone for listening. You can leave your comments on everything we've talked about under the link to this podcast on Cardsboard. You can, I think now, share comments on both Spotify and YouTube if you want to. And you can also find Jacob on Twitter at, I'm going to remember this one day, Cardinals1887.
Yeah, I think so. It's either that or 1887 Cardinals. I can't remember half the time either. So, but you'll find it somewhere.
I've done this wrap up like 50 odd times now, and I still don't remember the handle. One day. But until next time, thank you very much for listening. We will see you soon.